Thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us about your background before your near-death experience? Of course. I spent 30 years as a cardiac surgeon at Mayo Clinic, dealing with life and death situations daily. I've held hundreds of human hearts in my hands, literally. I've seen thousands of patients die and be resuscitated. I've always approached everything from a strictly scientific perspective. I was also, I should mention, a committed atheist. I used to tell my students that when the brain stops receiving oxygen, any visions or experiences are just the final firing of neurons. I couldn't have been more wrong. And this perspective changed dramatically after your near-death experience? Completely. But let me be clear, I'm still a scientist. I still believe in evidence and rational thinking. What happened to me simply showed me that our current scientific understanding is incomplete. There's so much more to reality than what we can measure in a laboratory. Can you take us through the events that led to your near-death experience? It was February 3, 2023. The irony doesn't escape me. I was actually giving a lecture at a medical conference in Phoenix about the latest techniques in cardiac revival. I had just finished my presentation when I felt a slight discomfort in my chest. As a cardiac surgeon, I knew immediately what was happening. I was having a massive heart attack. I remember looking at my Apple Watch. My heart rate was skyrocketing. I turned to Dr. James Chen, a colleague sitting next to me, and said, "James, the anterior wall MI is in progress. Get the crash cart." Then everything went black. "You were clinically dead for how long?" According to the official hospital records from Mayo Clinic Phoenix, I was clinically dead for 17 minutes and 22 seconds. No heartbeat, no brain activity. They attempted defibrillation 7 times. The team later told me they were about to call it when my heart suddenly started beating again. And during those 17 minutes? What I experienced in those minutes, it would take lifetimes to fully describe. The moment my heart stopped, I felt myself lift out of my body. I could see everything happening in the conference room. I watched my colleagues working on me, saw Dr. Chen doing compressions, and heard Dr. Sarah Williams shouting for epinephrine. I could even read the cardiac monitor showing asystole, flatline. But then, something changed. The scene began to fade, and I found myself moving through what I can only describe as a tunnel of light. But calling it a tunnel of light doesn't do it justice. The light was alive, conscious, loving. It was like being embraced by pure understanding and compassion. The transition was instantaneous. One moment I was in excruciating pain, the next, perfect peace. And this is when you encountered Jesus? Yes, but let me describe exactly how it happened. As I emerged from the tunnel, I found myself in what seemed like a dimension of pure light, but I could see everything with perfect clarity. There was no strain on my eyes despite the brightness. That's when I heard his voice. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once, calling me by name, Margaret. I turned, and I'm sorry, even now, months later, the emotion is still so raw. When I turned, I saw him, and every preconception I had about Jesus's appearance was completely transformed. Did he speak to you? Yes, and this is where my scientific training really comes into play. His voice was unlike anything I've ever heard. It resonated not just in my ears but in every particle of my being. It was neither particularly deep nor high, but it carried perfect authority and perfect love simultaneously. He spoke, and I understood everything in a way that transcended language. He said to me, "Margaret, you have sought truth through science, and this is good. But now you will see greater truths." Then he reached out and touched my forehead with his hand. His hands. I noticed the scars from the crucifixion, but they weren't grotesque or painful to look at. They glowed with a sort of triumphant light, like badges of honor. What happened when he touched you? In that moment, I experienced what I can only describe as complete knowledge. I saw the entire process of creation, not just the Big Bang, but the purpose behind it. I understood how every scientific discovery I'd ever learned about was part of a greater truth. I saw how every heart I'd ever operated on was designed with divine intelligence. But then he showed me something even more extraordinary. He took me through what seemed like a window in time, and I witnessed scenes from his life on Earth. I saw him teaching, healing, interacting with people. The level of detail was incredible. I could smell the dust in the air, feel the heat of the sun, hear the subtle differences in the Aramaic and Greek dialects being spoken. Can you share some specific scenes you witnessed? Yes, and this is what's so remarkable. I saw moments that aren't recorded in any historical accounts. I saw him early in the morning, preparing for the day's teaching. I saw him comforting a child who had lost her mother, with such tenderness that it broke my heart. I saw him in private moments with his disciples, explaining deeper truths about existence. But what struck me most was how he interacted with people who were suffering. I've spent my life trying to heal people, but his healing went so much deeper than the physical. When he touched someone, you could see their entire being transformed by love. Did he show you anything about the crucifixion? Yes, and this was perhaps the most profound part. He showed me the crucifixion from his perspective. I understand physical trauma intimately, but what I witnessed was beyond anything I could have imagined. I saw how he took on not just physical pain, but the spiritual and emotional pain of all humanity. But here's what's remarkable: even in those moments of greatest suffering, his face reflected not just pain, but love. His eyes never lost that incredible combination of authority and compassion. Even on the cross, his primary concern was for others. Please, take us through exactly what you saw. Every detail matters. He showed me 7 specific moments of his earthly life, each with details that transformed my understanding of historical events. First, the crucifixion, but from his perspective. As a thoracic surgeon, I immediately recognized medical details that aren't recorded in any historical accounts. I saw how the nails were positioned through the wrists, not the palms, severing the median nerves. I understood exactly how the weight distribution caused progressive asphyxiation. But what was most extraordinary was experiencing his consciousness during this event. While his body experienced unimaginable pain, his mind was focused on something far greater. I felt how he was absorbing not just physical pain, but the spiritual and emotional suffering of all humanity. It was like watching a cosmic sponge absorb an ocean of darkness. You mentioned other specific moments he showed you? Yes, let me share 3 that aren't recorded in any historical accounts. First, I witnessed him at age 12, having a private conversation with his mother Mary on their rooftop in Nazareth. They were speaking Aramaic, which I somehow understood perfectly. He was explaining to her about his growing awareness of his divine nature, and I could feel her mixture of awe and maternal concern. The second moment was during his early ministry, before any recorded miracles. He encountered a family whose young son was dying from what I could diagnose, with my medical training, as acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Instead of immediately healing the boy, he spent 3 days with the family, teaching them about the deeper meaning of suffering and divine love. When he finally healed the child, it wasn't just a physical healing, the entire family was transformed. The third moment was particularly powerful. It was the night before his crucifixion, hours before Gethsemane. He was alone on the Mount of Olives, in complete communion with what he showed me was the entire sweep of human history. I experienced how he saw every human life, every joy, every suffering, all simultaneously, and how his coming sacrifice would connect with all of it. But he showed me more than just these historical moments. He took me to experience both heaven, hell, and meeting God the Father. Could you describe what you saw of hell? As a surgeon, I've witnessed tremendous physical suffering, but what I saw in hell was different. It wasn't a place of active torture, as some describe. Instead, it was a state of being completely separated from divine love and truth. I saw souls who had built their own prisons through choices and beliefs that separated them from divine presence. The suffering wasn't imposed, it was the natural consequence of complete separation from the source of all good. As a doctor, I could recognize that their agony was self-perpetuating, like an autoimmune disease where the body attacks itself. And heaven? It was nothing like the popular descriptions. There were no clouds or harps. Instead, imagine the most profound moment of understanding you've ever had, the deepest love you've ever felt, the most perfect peace you've ever experienced, and multiply that by infinity. I saw how every scientific discovery I'd ever made was just a tiny glimpse of a greater truth. I understood how the physical laws we study are like shadows cast by a deeper reality. The mathematics we use to describe quantum mechanics, for instance, I saw were just approximations of something far more fundamental. You mentioned meeting God the Father. Could you describe that experience? Jesus led me into what I can only describe as the absolute center of reality. There was a presence that was both overwhelming and intimately familiar. Imagine if pure truth and pure love had a voice, if infinite wisdom and perfect compassion could speak. What struck me most was how this supreme being, this source of all existence, was completely focused on each soul as if it were the only one in creation. I experienced how every prayer ever prayed, every tear ever shed, every joy ever celebrated, was eternally present to this consciousness. I also understood something that revolutionized my scientific understanding, how what we call physical reality, including time and space, emanates from this divine consciousness the way thoughts emanate from a mind. Now, we've come to what many consider the most remarkable part of your testimony, your description of Jesus's actual appearance. Could you share what you saw? As a surgeon, I'm trained to observe and document with absolute precision. What I saw was nothing like traditional artistic depictions, yet it was immediately recognizable as the true original those depictions attempt to capture. He stood before me, and the first thing that struck me was his height. He was about 5 feet 8 inches or 5 feet 9 inches, of average build, but his presence filled infinity. His build was athletic but not imposing, consistent with someone who had worked as a carpenter and walked extensively during his ministry. His skin was what I would describe as light olive, similar to what you might see in modern Middle Eastern people who spend time both outdoors and indoors. It had this luminous quality, like it was lit from within, but it wasn't pale or white as European artists have depicted. It was more like, imagine the color of sun-warmed honey, but alive and glowing. His hair was perhaps the most striking departure from traditional depictions. It wasn't the dark brown or black we usually see in paintings, nor was it the pale blonde of European representations. It was a warm light brown with subtle gold highlights, falling in natural waves to just above his shoulders. When the light moved through it, and light was constantly moving through everything in this realm, you could see these remarkable variations in color, from honey gold to deeper amber. It was perfectly groomed but natural looking, like it had never been cut by human hands. What about his facial features? As someone who has studied human anatomy extensively, I can tell you his features were perfectly harmonious in a way that defied genetic probability. His face, it was perfectly proportioned in a way that defies human genetics. His forehead was noble and proportionate, with expressive eyebrows that weren't too thick or thin. His nose was straight and well-formed, neither too large nor too small, fitting his face perfectly. But his eyes were the most remarkable feature. In all my years of examining patients, I've never seen anything like them. They were this extraordinary color that seemed to shift between warm brown and a deep, penetrating blue, depending on how you looked at them. The closest comparison I can make is to precious stones, like amber in some moments and sapphire in others. But even that doesn't capture it. They held infinite wisdom and knowledge, but also such tender compassion that it brought me to my knees. His beard was full but immaculately neat, the same light brown color as his hair, and it framed his face perfectly. His lips were expressive, and when he smiled, it was like the entire universe lit up with joy. Did you notice anything about his expressions or the way he carried himself? Yes, and this is crucial. As a surgeon, I've spent decades reading people's faces, but his expressions carried a depth I've never seen in any human face. There was this perfect balance of authority and gentleness. When he looked at you, you felt completely known, every mistake, every fear, every triumph, but there was no judgment, only perfect understanding and love. His posture was regal but not stiff, dignified but completely approachable. He moved with a grace that seemed to transcend physical laws. Every gesture was purposeful and elegant, but entirely natural. What was he wearing? His clothing was simple but immaculately clean, a seamless robe that seemed to be made of material I can't even describe. It wasn't silk or linen or any fabric I know, but it moved like living light. The color was primarily white, but not a harsh hospital white, more like the color of morning sunlight. There were also portions that seemed to shift between deep blue and purple, but again, these colors were unlike anything we have on Earth. Did he give you any specific message to share? Yes, and this is what still moves me to tears. He looked into my eyes and said, "Tell them that I am more real than their doubt, more present than their fear, and more loving than their shame." Then he smiled, and in that smile, I understood everything, why I became a surgeon, why I had lived the life I had, even why I had to have this heart attack. He also showed me something about time, how what we perceive as linear time is actually part of a greater reality. He showed me how every prayer ever prayed, every tear ever shed, every joy ever celebrated, exists in what he called the eternal now. That sounds so profound. How did your return to your body happen? He told me it wasn't my time yet. He said, "You have been a healer of hearts in the physical realm. Now you will help heal hearts in a different way." Then he blessed me, and I felt myself being drawn back through the tunnel of light. The next thing I knew, I was gasping on the floor of the conference room, surrounded by my astonished colleagues. Dr. Chen was still there, tears streaming down his face. The cardiac monitor showed a perfect sinus rhythm, better than my normal baseline. How has this experience affected your medical practice and scientific worldview? I've actually come out of retirement to establish a research institute studying near-death experiences from a scientific perspective. We're using the latest neuroimaging technology and quantum physics theories to better understand these experiences. What's fascinating is that when we compile accounts from different cultures, times, and places, we find remarkable consistency in how Jesus is described, especially these specific details about his appearance that don't match traditional artistic depictions. The light brown hair, the shifting eye color, the particular quality of his skin tone, these details appear repeatedly in accounts from people who have never met or shared their stories. What would you say to skeptics who might be hearing this? As a former skeptic myself, I understand the doubt. I respect it. But I would ask them to consider this. Throughout my career, I prided myself on objective observation and precise documentation. What I experienced, the specific details about Jesus's appearance, the quality of light, the nature of consciousness beyond the body, these aren't vague, mystical descriptions. They're precise observations from someone trained to notice detail and maintain objectivity. The fact that these same specific details, the light brown hair with golden highlights, the eyes that shift between brown and blue, the particular quality of his skin tone, the average height, the perfect proportions, appear in accounts from across cultures and times, often from people who have never been exposed to each other's stories, that should interest any serious researcher. How has this experience changed your daily life? Everything has changed, yet nothing has changed. I still approach life with the same analytical mindset. I'm still a surgeon at heart. But now I understand that our physical reality is just the surface of something far more profound. I've started documenting every detail of my experience, creating what I hope will be a scientific framework for understanding NDEs. I've also been working with artists who have had similar experiences to create more accurate depictions of Jesus's appearance, based on our shared observations. But the most significant change is internal. That love I experienced, it wasn't just an emotion, it was a fundamental force more real than gravity. Knowing that this is the ultimate reality behind everything, it transforms how you live each moment. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share? Yes. To anyone who has had a similar experience but has been afraid to share it, you're not alone. What you experienced was real. As a doctor, I can tell you that consciousness transcending physical death isn't just possible, it's what I now understand to be our natural state. And to those who haven't had such an experience, the Jesus I encountered, with his light brown hair, his extraordinary eyes that shifted between amber and blue, his perfect proportions, and his overwhelming love, he's more real than anything in this physical world. He knows every detail of your life, every struggle, every joy, and he loves you with a completeness that our human minds can barely comprehend.